I'll lead the pledge. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Carmody, West Covina City Manager. Welcome. We're very glad you're here this evening. I'm going to ask Glenn Kennedy to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We appreciate everyone finding the time to join us tonight. We've been doing a series of these kind of meetings at the suggestion of some of the people that are here, that we take an opportunity to have a special moment to review some of the city's issues separately and off calendar, give us a chance to go in depth and to engage with the members of the community that are interested in these topics. Tonight, we're privileged to have with us our fire chief, Vince Capelli. He has a really nice PowerPoint presentation he's going to go through, and then we will be quite open to questions and comments. So welcome, Chief Capelli.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. I also like to thank everybody for taking the time and coming out this evening and being here with us to learn a little about the fire department. I would like to say we're going to go through the PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll open up for questions. So if you have any questions, please hold them to the end, and we'll answer as best we can. The presentation is going to be an overview of the fire department. We're going to talk about some response times. We're going to talk about some needs, and we're going to discuss some overtime. So with that being said, we'll start the presentation. Everybody knows that I'm the West Covina Fire Department Fire Chief, and I'm very proud and privileged to work for this community, to work with the firefighters, men and women in the fire department, city council, city government, everybody. It's really a privilege to work here, and I'm really glad I get to be part of this team. Real quick, just want to go over, if everybody knows, we have 5 fire stations that are strategically planned throughout the city. Those 5 fire stations hold different apparatus, different resources to respond to calls. Station 1, which is in the blue area, has a fire engine and a paramedic ambulance. Station 2 currently has a fire truck, has a paramedic ambulance, and it houses our command unit, which is in the green. Station 3, the north side of the city, has 1 fire engine. That's in the pink. Go down to the yellow area, to the center of the city, we have Station 4. There's currently 1 fire engine there and a paramedic ambulance. Then you have Station 5, the south end of the city. Within the red, we house 1 fire engine there. And on duty daily with all those resources, we have 23 personnel. Up here on the slide is our organizational chart of the fire department. It's got the fire chief, which manages the operations, the prevention, and administration. In administration, we have an administrative aide. We have senior administrative aide. We have 2 administrative aides, one's for fire prevention, one's for the operations and administration of the fire department. We currently have 2 part-time fire protection specialists, and there's also an LEA inspector. That's the fire chief is the LEA for the city and the BKK landfill. And we also have the shift commanders that run the daily operations. We have 3 of those, 1 each day, and then 5 fire stations. And we already broke down what's at each fire station. Continue on, fire department responsibilities, the fire administration division. It's the office of the fire chief, as I stated, the fire marshal, and the local enforcement agency. We manage the emergency management, training management, safety of the department, and all the personnel out of the fire administration division. Fire prevention division, or the community risk reduction division, handles mandated fire inspections, plan checks, company fire inspections, life safety inspections, and any cost recovery that's related to incident responses. And the fire suppression division, which is the operations, handles all emergency responses for emergency medical services, fire, and rescue, and they also do the day-to-day training activities required for the operations section. So real quick, go to overview of what some of our apparatus is. Might be an overview for some people or maybe some new information. Want to explain what a fire engine company is. A fire engine company is a fire engine that is an apparatus that provides 3 main functions. They have a pump, water tank, and fire hose. And they have a fire captain, a fire engine, and a firefighter. Those 3 personnel on a fire engine make up available resource to respond to fire and EMS and rescue operations. In West Covina, we have at least 1 paramedic on all of our fire engines, so we have advanced life support capabilities to handle and mitigate any life-threatening medical needs upon their arrival. Next, what is a fire truck? Fire truck has the big ladder on top. You see it going around all the time. A trunk company is an apparatus that utilized to support engine company operations during fire and rescue operations. It has a lot of the ventilation equipment, heavy rescue equipment. It's a big toolbox. In West Covina, we actually have Quint fire trucks, which means they also carry a water and a pump to put out fires as well. We are currently using our fire truck as a fire engine. As everybody knows, we are down one fire engine. So at Station 2, just the Quint responds out of there. And that carries one fire captain, one fire engineer, and two firefighters, a complement of one firefighter or one firefighter paramedic, depending on the day. It also is an ALS, Advanced Life Support capable resource. So upon arrival, they can help mitigate any life-threatening emergencies upon a response to a call. Next, we have Advanced Life Support. That's the paramedic units. Paramedic rescue ambulances. What is a paramedic rescue ambulance? Well, in West Covina, we have a paramedic rescue ambulance that can transport sick and injured patients upon the need when they respond to a call. They carry two firefighter paramedics on an apparatus, and that's per the mandate from the county. To be a paramedic ambulance, a paramedic unit in LA County must have two firefighter paramedics on there. Just for definitions, there's also something called a paramedic rescue squad. What is a paramedic rescue squad? It is just like an ambulance, other than it can't do transportation. It also has two firefighter paramedics on it, and sometimes we utilize other departments for mutual aid, and you may see them in the city responding to your house or your call. The difference is we now have to find a private ambulance or another ambulance to do transportation for any sick and injured folks. To continue on, apparatus. In the case we don't have one of our responding ambulances to come that have the paramedics on it, then we'll get a basic life support ambulance come that do not have paramedics on it. They can't do advanced life support. They can't help a critical patient. They basically are our transportation to the hospital. And sometimes we utilize them when we don't have a rescue ambulance available, or we have one of those mutual aid squads that come in. We need a transportation vehicle. In the city of West Covina, we have a command vehicle. That's the daily shift commander, the assistant chief. He rides around in a command vehicle. He responds to every incident that needs somebody to manage the incident, manage the operation, develop a plan to mitigate that emergency. And they have a command vehicle that has all the radios and equipment to do all that. The fire department is involved in a number of existing programs. We do a lot of public education. We go to public education to prevent loss of life, to teach people about fire safety. We do these programs at schools, at senior centers. We do them all over the city. Anytime there's requests for them, we will go. Use public education. We currently have a Fire Explorer program. We have a very robust Fire Explorer program with a lot of young men and women in there that are preparing for a fire service career. They come and they visit. They do training. They're evaluated. At a point, they do some training. They become eligible to do ride-alongs, and you can see them ride along with our fire department apparatus personnel and go on calls as well to hopefully have a career in the fire service. And they're from the ages of 15 to 21. Another existing program we have is we have a SWAT medic program where we have trained firefighter paramedics at all ranks, captain, engineer, firefighter, that assist our police department whenever there's a call out. The reason we have that is so if there's any life-threatening emergency take place at that call, any civilians that get hurt, any police officers that get hurt, we have immediately can care for that trauma incident upon it taking place at a SWAT call out. And we send 4 medics to every SWAT call out. We also have the ambulance subscription program where members of the community can, for $69, join the ambulance subscription program. Everybody in that household, if there's a call for service at your house, when you get the bill for service, you don't get charged if you're part of the subscription program. Most every insurance company, there is a co-payment that you have to pay. You would not have to pay the co-payment. We would accept whatever your insurance company pays. It covers any out-of-pocket expenses. We do inspections, a lot of businesses in the city. However, we have a number of businesses that we are lacking getting personnel to get there and inspect those. We're trying to build that program. We're slowly doing that. And the business inspection program will help keep the community safe, help understand the needs of the community and what's out there. So when you go to any business in the city, you feel safe and everything is safe if anything happens there. We also are trying to revamp our CERT program. We had a somewhat of a robust CERT program in the past. We still have a lot of equipment. We're sending personnel through some grants to get train the trainer. There are some individuals in the city that are already trained the trainers. We have some fire department employees that are training the trainer. So we're going to try to really build this program for the next 12 to 18 months. And hopefully we are there. So any type of emergency, as everybody knows, we're doing our plans to prepare for and respond to disasters. We want to have the community's involvement at the way, and the community emergency response team is a way for that to happen. Some programs we've done recently to help keep the community safe in the community risk reduction portions, fire prevention portions of the city is we partnered with some other departments in the region, and we got a software and a company that monitors the fire protection and detection systems to our businesses in the city, sprinkler systems. And the compliance engine actually keeps track and locates every sprinkler system in the city. They determine which ones do not have sprinkler systems that are up to date. Their 6-month tests, their 5-year tests, all the different tests are required by law. They reach out to those businesses and they say, hey, you need to get that. How that helps the fire department? It keeps the city safe, keeps us knowing what's there, and keeps knowing when the fire department goes there in an emergency that the system is working properly. We also do a program called emergency incident billing. So we go to a call if there's a flooding at your house, a car accident, or something like that, a fire. We will bill the insurance company for services that are rendered above and beyond what we're definitely not making the money back to what we spend. The individuals do not get charged. We're not going to send you a bill. It's only what's covered in your insurance plans. We take that. Streamline inspections, another way to help make the citizens safe and the community safe and the firefighters safe and respond to an emergency. We have a company called Streamline Inspections, which manages all our fire inspections. That's how we realized we were not following and finding all the businesses that need to be inspected. With this program, the business can go online, see what their violations are, or that they're up to codes, or what codes may be changed. And when we go out there to do inspection, we upload that in there, and they can get a pass or a fail and what needs to be fixed for their inspections. Just a better way to understand our inspections. We also had sorry about that. We had a false alarm program that we're actually working to figure out how we can make that a little better. The police and fire department go to a lot of false alarms, fire alarms, burglar alarms, and it takes away from us being available to go to another call. And those can be mitigated by people properly having their systems correct. And that's a program that's in our ordinance that we are working to enhance it. We're going to talk about our existing staffing model at this time, so everybody understands what we have to respond to calls for service in the community. We currently have 23 daily staffing through the 5 fire stations with 9 vehicles. And this outlines the 9 vehicles: 4 fire engines, 1 fire truck, 3 paramedic rescue ambulances, 1 command vehicle, making up the 9 daily staffing, 23 personnel. So if there's an emergency medical services request, somebody calls 911 that they're having shortness of breath, chest pain, anything simple, they broke their leg or something like that, we will respond to that. And we will respond to that with a fire engine and a paramedic rescue ambulance. The fire engine will get there most likely first, and they do most of the life-saving tasks. Fire engine gets there. They stop people that are choking. They help start CPR right away. They help them from breathing. So the fire engine is usually the first one that gets there, and sometimes the most important response resource to a life-threatening emergency. And we also, and obviously, I stated, had a captain, an engineer, and a firefighter on those apparatus, and one of them is a paramedic on all of ours. Then we also send a paramedic ambulance that goes there, and they're the paramedics that can continue the life-saving measures that was started by the fire engine, and also transport the sick and injured person to the hospital. And I'll continue. Hold on. So that's 2 apparatus with 5 personnel. So with that being said, if the medical response is going on with 2 apparatus of 5 personnel, the city now has available resources to go to another medical emergency or to a fire and rescue response of 6 apparatus, 16 personnel. So the portion on the side tells you what's available with just 1 EMS response. Well, we don't always have 1 EMS response. We might have 2, 3, 4 that are going on at the absolute same time. All of them can be critical. Some of them may not be critical. If the fire engine and the paramedic ambulance are on a call and determines that, you know what, this is not that critical, we've mitigated the emergency, we've helped the person, and another call comes out, those resources, if they're the closest unit, can now break away from that one call they're on, the fire engine or the paramedic, depending what is needed. So we do that and manage that through the dispatch center and to the on-scene resources. So a structure fire response or a multi-unit response that needs a number of vehicles, a number of personnel. So one structure response will take up 8 of our vehicles, 4 fire engines, a truck, 2 ambulances, 2 paramedic ambulances, and 1 command vehicle for a total of 21 staff. And here's the breakdown of that. We send 4 fire engines, 1 fire truck, a paramedic, 2 paramedic rescue ambulances, and a command vehicle, 8 apparatus, and 21 personnel to a report of a structure fire. Now, what does that leave us in the city for another call? 1 paramedic ambulance with 2 firefighter paramedics to go to any other call in the city. The whole city. A structure fire can last 1 to 2 hours, sometimes longer, depending on what's going on. Now, as the fire emergency is mitigated and resources can come available, those resources will respond to other calls, but there's things that happen there too. If they fought fire, they have to get their equipment cleaned up so they don't cross-contaminate any carcinogens from fighting that fire. So there's time delay for them to respond as well. So we got a little chart here of calls for service for 19, 20, 21, and 22. I'll highlight 2022. We ran on 9,961 calls. We were roughly 39 calls from 10,000 calls. And we had a fire loss of roughly $7 million. And that's calculated from the on-scene company officers and assistant chiefs that create the reports. They determine the loss of the contents inside the property and the property value and how much of the property was lost. So the way a fire and EMS response works, somebody calls 911. It goes to what's called the public service answering point, dispatch center, our communication center in West Covina. That is the police fire dispatch center here in the campus here at City Hall. At that point, the public service answering point will dispatch the call once they determine through the computer-aided dispatch what the proper resources are needed for that type of emergency. The resources then respond to the incident. The resources arrive on scene. If we don't have enough resources, the dispatch center will reach out to try to get some mutual aid resources, or if we've already have an automatic aid agreement with somebody else to come help in that certain location in the city. And that's all done in the computer-aided dispatch. So some things that affects our responses, numbers that we go by that shows that we're meeting the standards for responses is NFPA 1710 is a standard that outlines the minimum requirements for fire emergency services and career departments on how long it takes, that standard for us to respond to a call for dispatcher picking up the phone and for the first arriving department unit on scene. And this chart here just basically outlines what's stated in NFPA 1710. I'll break that down a little farther in the next slide, so we don't have to read this. So, like I said, NFPA 1710 response times, it talks about unit travel time. I'm going to highlight travel times. It states that the first due resource responding to a structure fire should get there in roughly 4 minutes. The second due, we would like them to be there in 6 minutes. This is for help for survivability of victims, help for firefighter safety, and mitigating that emergency. Total response time, which includes the dispatch, the call to the public safety answering port, the turnout time, firefighters and resources to get in their vehicle and go. The unit travel time is recommended to be there in 6 minutes and 4 seconds. That is the recommended time which increases survivability of victims and for safety for firefighters. Well, in West Covina, in 2022, through our dispatch center, we now have a robust program that calculates all the times we have. And in 2022, our average response time, that's the travel time from leaving the station or wherever they're at from another call to get on scene, was 8 minutes and 41 seconds. To continue with that, the total response time for 2022, 9,961 calls, our average was 9 minutes and 18 seconds in the city of West Covina. So some things we need, an engine company to help mitigate those emergencies, to help firefighter safety, survivability of victims, to decrease those response times. We would need to bring back the engine company that we had to shut down. We have a lot of calls for service that are EMS, so we would try to implement another paramedic rescue ambulance. We do need personnel to help with the training, to help with the administration of these personnel. We're outdated in some mandates related to training and in our fire prevention. And we need fire prevention personnel to help with the inspections that we are not completing. Some other needs we need. The city of West Covina doesn't have a training tower. We have not had a training tower. We're lacking in the ability to keep up maintaining our skills for fire ground operations, for hazard materials responses, for rescue responses, for emergency medical services. We need a classroom so firefighters actually can go to and learn these trade and work on their craft and learn the new things that take place. It's very evolving regularly on how we do stuff. And we need to meet the standards. And we had a training tower. We could do that. A classroom, as I stated. And we need a training officer. It's mandated that we should have somebody that manages our training. That would help with a lot of our potential injuries and stuff like that. In the communication center needs, we need a dedicated fire dispatcher. Right now, it's shared with the police officers. The police dispatchers do police and fire. They answer a fire call. They may dispatch it, but then they may have to answer another call for service into the PSAP. And they can't answer the fire resources that are on a fire potentially, or other calls that come in for service. They can't do that. When we're working a fire, there should be a dedicated person answer our calls. Well, at this time, there's not a dedicated person that can answer a call. It's not a dedicated person that can help you if you're not breathing or bleeding. They may have to answer another 911 call. They have to answer a police officer. They might have to answer another fire apparatus, or even call another agency to help come to a call in West Covina. So we need to enhance our communication center with dispatchers. And another area that we can help out in our communication center is something that's called tiered dispatch. It's a system that the dispatcher can evaluate what resources need to go to a call, mostly related to emergency medical services calls, being a cut finger versus a gunshot wound versus a traffic accident, and that determines what resources will go to the call. We don't have the resources in the dispatch center to do that. Another service that we have in the community center, we do have something that's emergency medical dispatch. The problem is there's not the resources in there to help with mitigated emergency on scene and give pre-arrival instructions. You call 911, you're choking, somebody's not breathing, somebody needs CPR. The dispatcher can sit on the phone and help you. But this time, we can't utilize our emergency medical dispatch because they're too busy having to call for resources, answer another 911 call, or do dual service. So there were some evaluations of our service delivery. There was a standards of coverage done in 2007. There was a report by a group, a Messina group, that did it in 2021. And then the LA LAFCO did a report in 2020. And a lot of these talked about services of the fire department, administration, operations, and prevention. We're going to highlight just a couple of those. Some other reports we need is we do need to do an updated standards of coverage. Obviously, it hasn't been done in 15 years. We do need to do a community risk assessment. We need to develop a strategic plan. And I have emergency preparedness planning here, but we are in the middle of doing that right now. As a lot of you have seen at the recent council meeting, we're already doing the annexes related to emergency planning and operations response. So I wanted to compare some other cities to everybody, because there's a lot of questions of, well, what's West Covina service to the community and how do we do it compared to other cities? This slide right here basically talks about other cities that also have police and fire, which means the budget is required to have police and fire services, and that's what we fund. 3 other cities in LA County have dual service that do not have any extra revenue source. That would be Manhattan Beach, Beverly Hills, and Palos Verdes. And this compares West Covina, who does not have an extra revenue source to help fund public safety. And you can see in there the cost per capita, how much those cities actually pay cost per capita. The national standard on this slide, you can see, is $348. The California standard is $414. West Covina allocates out of the budget $190 per capita at this time. Firefighters per capita, the national standard is 1 to 1,000. Locally, it's 1 to 1,100. West Covina is 1 to 1,580. This also outlines how many firefighters, their square miles, and the calls for service those departments have. So the next slide compares West Covina's service delivery to departments, agencies that have an extra revenue source and dual service, police and fire, which means they do have that sales tax, user utilities tax, or what have you to help fund public safety. And as you can see, there's a couple comparisons there to cities that are almost the exact same population as us, 105 in Burbank, 111 in Downey. And you can see what they pay for cost per capita, how many firefighters they have per capita in relation to how we service our community. And this slide just helps show that, and how much calls for service they have as well. And as you can see, again, we're the lowest of everybody with dual service. that has an extra revenue source as well. So 15-year comparison in 2007, last time standards of coverage was done, we had 6,343 calls. We fielded daily 10 apparatus, 10 resources to respond to calls. We had 80 sworn personnel. We had 6 civilian personnel. One of those was part-time, and we had a budget of $15 million roughly. And in 2022, we ran 9,961 calls. We have 9 apparatus. We have 70 sworn personnel and 5 civilian. However, 2 of those are part-time. And our budget was $20 million. Some things to take away from that is there's 3,618 calls in that 15 years. We've increased. We closed the fire engine, and we decreased 11 personnel to service the community. And obviously, this is how outlines a little bit more. The standards of coverage 15 years ago stated that we were not meeting NFPA 1710 on-scene response. None of the calls we were responding to, and this reiterates the amount of calls we ran on and the personnel. The Messina Group report basically talked about the same stuff that we also said. NFPA 1710 wasn't met. We do need fire prevention enhancement. We need a training facility. We need to increase the dispatch system for firefighter safety and station upgrades. We've done a number of station upgrades, repaired some roofs and done some flooring and painting and stuff like that. So we have done that, but there is some other upgrades that need to be done continuing to the other stations. Station 3 and Station 1 needs to be rebuilt, as we all are aware of that. And it also noted some impact fees. We do try to get some impact fees for new businesses and new residencies that come in, which would help alleviate the increased calls for service, increased wear and tear on equipment. There was a municipal services review on the Consolidated Fire Protection District in Los Angeles, and it's out there, and it just talks about what's around West Covina, and it highlighted some stuff on West Covina, and it just basically talks about services that could be rendered and help the county service, and it can help West Covina, is what that report said. So let's talk about overtime. Kind of a big subject. Everybody's probably here for that, but so we're there now. Overtime is enacted when we need to have constant staffing, and constant staffing requires 1-for-1 backfill. And the 1-for-1 backfill means if there's a spot on any of our apparatus, daily staffing apparatus, we backfill that with an overtime person to keep that resource available to respond to any call for service. If we don't backfill that position, that vehicle, that response unit, that resource will not be able to respond and mitigate the emergency it's intended to mitigate. Those backfills are filled with personnel from other shifts, either voluntary or we force them. We regularly have a number of forces daily where we force people that you're not going home at all. You're stuck here. You're working. You have to work this spot. And it's called a force hire, and they happen every day. Some things that affect the constant staffing is there's benefit time. The fire department members are afforded leave time. Just like every business, you get vacation, you get sick. The different in the fire department, if the captain on engine 3 has a vacation day, we have to backfill that. We can't leave it open. So the members are afforded this leave time: vacation time, sick time, bereavement time, holiday, and comp time. That's the leave times that is part of the benefit for the fire department. This overtime and this benefit time doesn't include now vacancies that occur, injuries on duty, workers' comp, mental health needs, and other leave needs. So with that, for the fiscal year overtime budget for 22-23, the budget had a $3,233,160 allocated for overtime. And what that money is to cover constant staffing for budgeted and known leaves of absence. Like I stated, vacation, sick, bereavement, comp time, holiday in lieu. So we have to fund that. For this fiscal year so far, from July 1st, there has been 17,185 hours that have been used for benefit time, which is roughly about $1.2 million. The way we came up with that was we took, an average captain overtime rate and how many captains were off on those leaves, and that's how we came up with that. We did it by each and every rank. So these numbers may not be exact, but right now we're about 2.8 for the year. Unforeseen overtime costs currently this fiscal year, which includes workers' compensation, which is unknown who's going to get injured and have to be off for some time. We're unknown people that are going to be off for COVID, either COVID family or COVID themselves, and then unknown vacancies that we haven't filled yet due to a number of reasons. And so far this fiscal year, from July 1st till March 15th, We spent 25,804 total hours to backfill those unforeseen vacancies for an amount of $1.6 million this year to date. And again, we used the same methodology was the average hourly rate per rank and the rank hours that were off on those leave times. And that's how we came up with that. To dive down a little further into that, like I stated, July 1st to March 15, injury on duty. Since July 1st, we've had 17 different personnel that have been either on or off duty. Some have been off since then. Some have had surgeries. And it's cost us roughly about $900,000 out of that fiscal year budget for overtime to backfill and keep resources available and respond to every and all emergencies in the city of West Covina. And that's a rough estimate of how I told you how we got to those numbers. COVID-19, we've had to backfill 8 different personnel, roughly around $31,000. So vacancies, we've had to cover out of that backfill vacancies for $614,000. Off-duty injury, this is a person who had to take leave because they hurt themselves off-duty and didn't use the workers' compensation or IOD portion of leave time. That was about $55,000. And like I said, total unforeseen overtime expenses so far has been roughly about $1.6 million. To go a little further into that, vacation, sick, holiday in lieu, and comp time, and also bereavement. This is negotiated time that's afforded to all personnel. So that's caused us some leave time and overtime. And the solution is that it's related to the MOU. And we have to have our firefighters are going to get vacation time. They have to have sick time. They're going to go on bereavement. And that's stuff that they have to have, just like every other person in any other business, any other organization. Injury on duty, health and wellness program. Our staff are being asked to run more calls with less equipment. People are getting injured more. They're running way more calls than we ever did before. Increased staffing would help distribute the workload, help hopefully bring down those injuries on duty. Continuing this, COVID-19 is actually a good number when you talk to other fire departments. We did some stuff right away to implement policy procedures to help limit exposures in our department. We purchased PPE to reduce exposures. And throughout the pandemic, our numbers were lower than most LA County fire departments and related to COVID backfilling and needs with our personnel. Continuing for vacancies, so we spent about $614,000 to do vacancies, and a number of that is in the firefighter paramedic rank. It's a problem in the fire service right now, getting qualified personnel to come get hired. And we spent about $444,000 in vacancies to try to get people to come test for our department. And we have a retention problem, people leaving to go to other departments, and we have to backfill them until we can hire vacancies. What we did last year was we identified that we're having trouble hiring people. So we took 3 firefighters and we sent them to paramedic school. Now we had to pay their spots that are open until they came back. And now they're filling firefighter paramedic overtimes right now. So it was a much win for the community of West Covina and the fire department. So we had promotional lists where we continue with captains and engineers promoting into those open vacancy spots. We spent approximately $170,000 doing those lists, coming up with those lists to actually promote people. And that's a very minimal amount for open spots for promotionals. Because you never know when somebody's going to retire, somebody's going to leave to go to another department, and then we have to have a promotional list to promote these people. So department highlights, so we're a leader in emergency medical service. You should know that you're getting the best of the best responding to you on every single apparatus that's coming to you. We are identified by the LA County Department of Health Services on our return to spontaneous circulation, people that have stopped breathing, people with heart stopped. We are one of the best in the county, and we get recognized every single year on our what's called our ROSC stays. And you should know that we have done stuff to get grants. We wrote grants to get something called the Lucas device to help us during CPR, that helps give adequate CPR during somebody who's in a cardiac arrest. And we've also done some humoral IOs, which is a better way to give IVs when people's in a critical situation. And so we're the leader in a lot of that stuff. And 87% of our personnel are all paramedics. We would love to have 100%, but that costs. But we do have somebody to respond to every single call. Some progressive programs we have that serve the community. We have the tactical emergency medicine, the SWAT medics that help mitigate a life-threatening emergency that takes place, any SWAT call out to any civilians, any police personnel immediately. We are part of urban search and rescue. We have trained a number of personnel to be able to respond to any collapses, any earthquakes, or anything within our community, which we didn't have before. We were going to be relying on other mutual aid departments, to which we have built a program here to we can help mitigate that. We still have a lot of work to do with that, and we have enough personnel that are trained and experts that we are now part of a regional task force 2. Just a note real quick, about an hour ago, we got requested to go up to Bakersfield to a number of search and rescue issues for collapses and avalanches. So our members from our urban search and rescue are actually going to be responding to help out our neighboring mutual aid, which is fully refundable by the state. We have a robust arson investigation team that works very closely with the police department to respond to any calls for service where we had an arson, and we were able to evaluate that, investigate those, and arrest people and get those criminals off the street much more efficiently than we have in the past. We also are part of a regional system for an unmanned aircraft system, drones. We've got grants from the county and from the federal government to develop a drone program, which we're a regional response, which is refundable, which is reimbursable, I should say, if we respond to that request, and it enhances our ability to mitigate emergencies here in West Covina. And with that, I would like to share some action shots of the fire department, doing some hazard materials training, responding to real fire department responses for fires, doing some searches and rescue of somebody trapped, other fires, calls for service in the canal, a brush fire, and that's just some action shots for y'all. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I hope I gave a lot of information, and I'm sure we have a ton of questions.
Thank you, Chief. If we could just take a breath for a moment. Really appreciate everyone being here tonight. Can't say that loudly enough. We've got some microphones. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on the YouTube. If we could talk one at a time, I'm happy to pass out the microphone. We can share if you'll raise your hand, and we'll welcome those questions right now. Thank you.
So we have Captain Sean Wise, and we have Assistant Chief Mike Brown that's going to walk around with some microphones, and feel free to ask your question. Try not to make them too hard of questions. No, I'm just kidding.
I have a question. If I believe so, a Quint was at one time at Station 5. Do they move around from station to station? That's question one, because now it's at Station 2. Second question, can you elaborate what a command unit is? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Those are easy questions. The truck company was moved when we shut down Engine 4 in 2018 from Station 2 to Station 4. After some time of it being there, we were realizing that it wasn't best served the community there. Station 4's district has a lot of hills. It has Galster Park. It has some locations that the truck, which is a very large vehicle, not intended to go on day-to-day emergency responses and be basically pounded in the ground. And we were was a lot of wear and tear on it. And it was slow to get to the calls in those locations. And we had to fire a Galster Park to where the truck was the first one there. And it's definitely not the appropriate vehicle to go on that call first. So we did a little change of our deployment model. We moved it to Station 2. And obviously, since the engine company was at Station 2, we moved that to Engine 4. And it's just a numbering thing. We now opened Engine 4 and closed Engine 2. It's just the same thing. We're still down one engine company. Hope that answers your question. Second question, what is a command unit? So the day-to-day operations need to have a shift commander. In West Covina, we call our shift commanders assistant chiefs. Other cities call them battalion chiefs, division chiefs. There's lots of different names for them. Basically, they run the day-to-day operations of all the personnel that are working. They manage and mitigate and command any emergency that takes multiple resources that are there, be it a traffic accident when people's trapped, be it a collapse, a structure fire, somebody over into the canal, hazard materials response. We need somebody there that's actually away from the actual operations, and they're outside managing resources, assigning resources, listening to the radios, ready for any maydays, any personnel to get injured. And also at the same time, our shift commanders do what most other departments do. They also manage the other calls that are going on in the city, making sure dispatch is getting mutual aid and automatic aid to cover our stations while we're mitigating that emergency. So we're actually working at the same time at the command unit. Command unit has to have a number of radios because when we're mitigating an emergency, there's a administration radio channel that people coming to the fire or the emergency. There's a command channel. There's a tactical channel. There's emergency response channel for emergency safety problem on the fire. So they have to manage all that, and they keep track and they document the incident as it goes on. Hope that answered your question.
With the increase of fires throughout the years, what percentage of it is a electric vehicle involved, or is it, a heating related issue like we've had in the last couple weeks? And then secondly, for, the overtime issues, is there a possibility of having people trained to fill in, basically you hire a crew to fill in vacancies and be trained in different ways that they could help fill in, so that way you don't have to have people do overtime, but perhaps a person that can either do inspections if everybody's, there, or fill in for vacancies?
To answer your first question, that's a really in-depth question. It would take a diving into and going to every single call and see what the cause of that call was and determining which ones are electric vehicles. We do a mass upload to the National Fire Incident Reporting System, and they calculate all that in the federal government. And there's reports that come out annually through the National Fire Protection Association and all the some agencies that determine what fires were that. We don't have that readily available. I can tell you that 34 of our car fires were electric vehicles, and 6 of our fires were from a heating source. We don't have that readily available to give you that number. To answer your other question, that's an even harder question to answer. Either way, to fill that spot, to have that resource still go, you have to it would be backfilled with an overtime spot. If I hear you right, you're trying to say have extra people on duty every day. That's still correct, but we still have to pay them a salary. So it's either with that salary, you don't have to pay their salary, their benefits, they get time off as well. So the cost for having an extra captain on every day, or you would need, 5 captains on every day? Because we have 5 apparatus. If all 5 of those captains took the day off, we'd have to have 5 floaters, I think is the term that's been used before. But now we're paying them a full salary. It is absolutely cheaper, because overtime is something that you have to utilize daily to fill the resources and have them constant staffing, than having a full-time salary. If one captain was gone, let's say a spot is gone let's say a captain was on injury for the whole year, and we filled that in with overtime the whole year, it's cheaper than hiring a 6th captain that's on duty that day and his benefits and saving and salary to fill that spot.
If my memory is correct, the city manager has done reports that indicated you're getting what the fire department got out of COVID money. It seems to me you got equipment like an engine or a quint or something. If you did, what's the status of that?
Very good question. Thank you. So we currently have, through the COVID ARPA money, we received funds through the budget to order 2 fire engines and 1 truck, which is also a quint cable truck. They both are currently in production and being built. Our members have been back to the factory, and they have done the specs, and they should be here. Fingers crossed. We were promised May, but now we're looking at August, September. On that note, to let you know, if we ordered a fire engine right now today, any fire department in the United States who order a fire engine from a number of vendors that make fire engines, you're looking at a 3-year delivery time.
I'm trying to say my next sentence as objectively and calmly as I can. Will these new equipment be electric vehicles? I've read there's fire departments that are going EV.
I can answer that one word: no.
Good.
Anyway, my question is a little more complicated, but it starts in the same place she did, which goes back to the COVID money. I objected at the time, and I'm still objecting to allocating the COVID money all to engines. From everything I've studied, and I've studied this issue a lot, the most effective way to do dispatch is called tiered response. And the reason it's the most effective is you can tailor the response to exactly what the situation is and save a lot of resources. And I'll just give a couple of examples. The vast majority of calls for fire department services are for medical services. The vast majority of medical services calls are not for advanced life support, they're for basic life support. And the city has no staffing for basic life support. They only have staffing for advanced life support and for fires. And yet, when you look at national data, the need is for basic life support. Simple things like, I fell down and I can't get up. You don't need 5 people to respond to that, but that's what the city does. They take 5 people to respond. And it's because they don't have tiered response. Tiered response is you size the response to the situation. Basically, if somebody falls, you send an EMT. And I've been advocating this for actually way before the current people are here, current council, current fire chief, current city manager. And I was really disappointed that the city chose not to spend any of its vast resources. $20 million is a lot of money from the federal government. Didn't spend any of it to further effective use of the personnel. And it's a comment. I'm more of a, because I know it's a complicated issue, and I spent a lot more time studying it than I just finished talking about it. But I really think this deserves serious inquiry and serious consideration of allocation of resources in a different way. And I'll just give you a model that I'm aware of.
Can we take some of that at a time? Because you asked a lot. I don't want to forget them.
Okay, just one last thing. Okay. Just an example. Los Angeles City Fire Department uses tiered fire. They never send 5 people on a response. They send 4 for a structure fire and 2 for medical. And the cost is reasonable. The response time is amazing. 4 minutes, including the dispatch time and the prep time. And I really think that model should be copied. Thank you.
I'll start off with your first point, Jim, was you spoke about the COVID ARPA money and that we spent all the money on fire apparatus, and you disagreed to that. We also spent, I can speak for the fire department, because I don't remember all the stuff that was spent with those funds, but we bought needed EKGs with that money. We had our EKGs were like 15, 16 years old, so we updated those. We also are buying self-contained breathing apparatus. We also purchased 2 ambulances, which is a whole other story. It's a little delayed on getting them here. We also, I think we did some needed mandated renovations of the fire station with those. So we didn't just buy fire engines. But now I'll go to the tiered dispatching. I agree with you. We do need dedicated dispatchers to do tiered dispatching. But from being in the fire service for 37 years and gone on hundreds of thousands of calls, I would never just want 2 EMTs sent to a fall. Because the person calling the 911 call is not a doctor or an EMT or a paramedic or someone that's trained in any life support, life-saving services. A lot of times those falls are head injuries. They're bleeding out, a broken neck, a broken leg. 2 people in EMTs are not going to mitigate that emergency. You do need the 5 personnel. So tiered dispatch will help with understanding smaller calls than that, a broken finger, a cut finger, something like that, and tailor that. Tiered dispatching will still send most of our calls to 5 personnel, and that is the appropriate response to most of those calls. We need tiered dispatching, and we do need emergency medical dispatching. Now to your LA City, you referenced LA City, I'll bring that to you. LA City does have basic life supports, and they fill that with 2 firefighters, and those firefighters are available to also go on calls. The cost for that is very expensive. And they do not just send 2 firefighters on most of their calls. I don't know where that information comes from. I apologize. I'd love to work with you further to help you get that information properly. And they do not just send 4 personnel to a fire. They actually send probably, and Captain Y is a little bit more versed on it than me, I think they send about 6 more personnel on a structure fire than us on every single structure response. So, and their staffing is 4 firefighters or 4 personnel on every single fire engine and 5 on every fire truck. And we are, like I stated, 3 and 4. Which the 5 and 4 is the industry standard. So we're not even meeting the industry standard to field our resources with the proper people. If anything further with that, or questions with that, or?
Just to piggyback off that, what's the difference between industry standard and what's a requirement in staffing?
So, There's NFPA standards that talks about what a fire engine should have on it, what a paramedic unit should have on it. LA County decides what paramedics need to be on a certain apparatus, if it's a assessment engine or if it's a assessment truck or if it's a paramedic unit, and they dictate how many personnel to be on it. The industry standard is what we've determined that helps with victim survivability. The industry, the fire service has evaluated calls and the types of fires we go on every day. It's happening all over the United States. It's just unbelievable how much testing they do. And they've determined that, hey, if you send this amount of people on the first unit to get there, the survivability of the victims that are in that fire, the survivability of the firefighters saving those victims of the call, you should have this personnel going and they should get there in this time. If they get there outside that time, the likelihood of somebody surviving that call is little to none. That's where you get the industry standard and where that comes from. I hope that answered your question.
Should just left it with you. I thought Jim had more to say. I mean this in the most respectful way. What does the fire chief do? Like, what do they oversee? I don't think that was on the slide. Two, if we go back a couple of slides where you compare the costs, I think it was like 2017 and 2022, there's like a $5 million difference. Is that due to the bargaining units getting increases for all the staff, or is it, what is that made up of? And three, recently there was an independent audit, if you want to call it that, of the overtime. We were never given an answer as to how the overtime is approved. Like, what is that process?
So to answer your first question, what does the fire chief do? That could be a whole another 2-hour meeting because, so the fire chief manages all the administration, fire prevention, operations, oversees everything, hiring, everything. Also, I manage the fire as the fire marshal, handle all the plan checks, everything comes from fire prevention, fire inspections, manage all the personnel. Basically, I also write all the reports that have to do with the staff reports, stuff like that, and determine what our budget's going to be and manage all that. I don't have any personnel in fire administration that's assisting me. I'm a one-man shop, basically. So in our fire department, which is different than almost every fire department in our region, I'm also the local enforcement agent to our BKK landfill, which means I manage an inspector that goes out and inspects the portion that the city is required to enforce violations and inspections there. And I also manage that, which is different from every other fire department. So I do all that. It's a lot. It's very busy. Meetings and determining industry standard and helping writing policies and directing personnel and going out to the crews, and I train with them and I go on calls with them too. If there's a big fire, big emergency, I'm there. I'm there to support my team, which is either maybe communicating with the city government to let them know what's going on that call, dealing with people that are coming there, make sure they're fed, they got food, they got equipment, make sure the other resources are on those calls. So if there's a fire at 2:00 in the morning, the dispatch center calls me and wakes me up, and I communicate with other agencies, make sure we have ambulances coming, we have fire engines coming from different agencies while I'm there, and I help with that because the incident commander is running the call, dispatch is answering the calls. We need somebody to do that, so I do that most of the time when we have a fire. Your call, the comparison was 2007 to 2022 is a 15-year comparison. I think you asked, was the $5 million? I mean, that equates to, I believe it was 1.6% a year. Inflation is more than that, and most of the time we should be going up anywhere from 2 to 4% a year in cost to put money away to buy fire engines, fire equipment, fire ambulances, to prepare for training and stuff like that. So we should be having that there, and that's what that $5 million was. It's actually a very small amount from that 15 years. And then you had another question. I paused. You said overtime audit. What was your question? I was approved. So we have a constant staffing. We field 23 personnel a day, which comes down to 5 captains, 5 engineers, 1 shift commander, and then the firefighters and paramedics on the apparatus. Those have to be filled. And when there's a vacancy, however that vacancy takes place, just that one vacancy of that day, if somebody calls in sick, somebody's out on bereavement, somebody's out on injury, that is filled. And there's a system that's in there. Nobody gets to choose their own overtime. It's a system that determines who's up next. It tells you, hey, so Somebody can't go, you know what? I want this overtime. I'm going to take the day off. You get my overtime. That doesn't happen. It's impossible. The system tells who's next for the overtime and who's available to take an overtime. It also tells who's forced to take an overtime, because most of the firefighters don't want to work. And they're forced. If you look at our daily schedule, people are forced to work, and we tell them, you're not going home today. The system tells it who's up for that by how many times they've been forced, how many times they've been on overtime, voluntary, involuntary, and the system automatically picks it. So what is approved is leaves. So there is some control. It's very little due to contractual agreements of vacation days that are taken off, and when that can happen, who's available. Because we don't want to have every single 23 people taken off a vacation day, and then we have to have 23 overtimes. It's just not feasible to be able to do that. So there's some leeway there to mitigate that. And sometimes guys' vacations are canceled. I mean, it happens regularly. I hear the complaints on a regular basis. I had a vacation going here, and it was canceled because I got forced these 2 days. And then I have to hear it from families too that call, because we're forcing people to work. So that's how that works. Nobody picks their own.
I'm going to blame this on Marcia because she asked me to talk some more. My other favorite subject, and this started again way before the current management or council. Each and every year, the fire department has overdrafted its adopted budget by at least $1 million, most often by $2 million. And when you look at detailed analysis of the spending in the department each and every year, the pattern is consistent that the reason for this overdraft is essentially overtime. And I think and I've said this in public at council meetings several times, I think there's a misunderstanding of what a budget is. A budget is a plan of what you're going to spend in the year, and you're supposed to stick with it. It actually is adopted council policy that you're supposed to stick with your budget. And yet, each and every year, the fire department doesn't, and it's unique because that doesn't happen with any other department. Police has had the problem in the past, but they don't have it currently. And the reason I'm exercised about this is I've done budgets all my life. The last 10 years of my life, I actually specialized in bankrupt agencies. And why were they bankrupt? They spent more than they took in. And West Covina had that problem until until last year when the federal government poured in an extra bunch of money. But the problem will develop again if budget isn't managed. And my point that I'm trying to make with this little speech, because it's not really a question, is I think there's a conceptual problem. You used the phrase unanticipated overtime in your presentation. I don't think that's an accurate statement. If it happens each and every year, it's not unanticipated. It either should be budgeted for from the get-go, or measures should be taken to reduce the program to match the budget. To me, those are the only two valid choices if an agency is to be run properly, managed properly. And this year I just did an analysis of your current spending pattern and your current adopted budget, and you're going to overdraft again by at least $1 million. And the point I'm trying to make with all of this is that something needs to be done to change this pattern. There is going to come a time, not very distant future, where the city's again going to face money problems. And the only way you're going to solve it is by managing your budget. And I know the money problems are due to unbelievably expensive pension costs. I know that. I know that's the underlying issue. But you still have to manage it regardless of what the cause is. And that's it. I'm done.
So there was a question in there, Jim. Basically, you asked about managing the budget and what is adopted budget and unforeseen. The unforeseens don't happen every year. There was a time in the past prior to the current council, the current management team, where there was a number of vacancies that were not funded. Were not filled, and it cost a lot to pay for those vacancies. That was the overtime problem before. Now we've done a really good job of trying to keep these vacancies under control, and they rarely happen. And our finance team does an amazing job evaluating how much it's going to cost to fund the fire department. And there's only a certain amount of money they allocate to us. And like I stated in the slide, we had 17 personnel that were injured overworked, not enough proper equipment for them to go on, working on old fire engines, doing the job for you every single day. They don't want to go out and get these surgeries. 17 personnel, that overtime budget is over $1 million, which would take us under the budget amount if we didn't have 17 injuries. 17 injuries is a lot. And a way to fix that is we've already discussed that. So I discussed how much we're paying for our budget, and our budget should be more to actually serve the community and the resources we need. Our materials and services is very low amount.
On. Two questions. First one would be if you could elaborate on the criteria that brings Beverly Hills, Palos Verdes, and Manhattan Beach into local comparison with West Covina, as was on your slide. And then second question was just curiosity, on Jim's point, with regard to the pensions. How many people are getting paid out pensions, and what does that payout look like yearly?
So the slide with the Beverly Hills, Manhattan Beach, and Palos Verdes was that they are the other cities in LA County who have dual service. They also have a police department and a fire department. So that organization, that city, has to fund both of those. So they're a comparison to us. We do the same thing. We have a police department and a fire department. As we know, not every city has a police department and a fire department. What's comparison to West Covina with those cities is they do not have a extra tax to help fund public safety, meaning users' utilities, a sales tax, sewer. They don't have the extra taxes that could be implemented through voters to help fund that stuff. That's how that slide comes up. That's how we compare to those. And they still, without those taxes, give the money to the fire department to fill the proper resources and the amount of funds needed to mitigate any emergency as an all-risk fire department.
Well, Monrovia has a PD and a fire. They wouldn't compare due to what aspect?
So the way and that was the next slide. On that slide, what I compared it was those are cities with dual service, police and fire. Some of those cities were almost the same size fire department, same size community. They do have an extra tax to help mitigate, to help fund those services, police and fire. They do have a sales tax. They do have a user utilities tax. They do have a sewer tax that's voted upon the people to help fund those services. You can go there and look, they do have those, and those come in every year. And that goes to public safety. Some of them actually have a tax that specifically says to fund public safety.
Chief, can I answer that question from a slightly different perspective?
Yes, sir.
We're really blessed to have a fine, paid professional, independent city fire department. We have trained professionals that know what they're doing, and they give their lives in service to our community. But the most amazing thing about this business we're in the field of public administration, is the extent to which known principles, known best practices aren't followed. In his slides, the chief went over this, but we went over it pretty quickly. He talked about standards of coverage. In the literature, it's well known that the best way to study these questions is to engage in a process of fire prevention and control and EMS master planning, that we might then decide what's at risk in the community, how many high-rise buildings, how many babies, how many grandmas, and what are acceptable levels of risk. That is the important conversation that I don't think we've gotten to yet. I think it'd be a necessary study because we've made good gain against some of these national standards, but we're not there yet. One of the reasons we used the Recovery Act money toward fire equipment is because our equipment was on its last legs. And we can't ask our paid professional firefighters and EMS personnel to run on calls in equipment that's at the end of its useful life. It's been run to fail. We put assets into service and we run it until it fails, and then we act surprised. And so we had a conversation around those Recovery Act monies in this room with some of these self-same people. What are our priorities? And my answer was, I don't want to do business assistance. I'm your city manager. I want to get the city personnel and facilities to standard. But it comes at a high price. I mean, our new ladder truck being built by the Pierce people in Appleton, Wisconsin is $1.8 million with an M. So it's not inexpensive. The new pumper engines, same story. It's quite expensive to do this and do it correctly. But I would highly recommend, maybe as part of the next budget year, if we can find our way clear to do it, to the council, that they engage in this SOC, standards of coverage. And let's have that conversation as a community about what's at risk and what's acceptable. If you've got a fire in your home, a kitchen fire doubles in size every 5 minutes. And so you want the team there like now. But you can see by this data that we're not there yet. We've made good gain, but we still have a long ways to go. Our fire department is underfunded.
To follow with that, as the city manager stated, the standards of coverage, we did one in 2007. The city went out and did a risk assessment and standards of coverage 2007 and stated that we were underfunded, underserved in resources to mitigate emergencies, and we've gone backwards since 2007, 15 years. So that was that comparison. It was this risk assessment and standards of coverage.
Chief, first of all, thank you for having the community meeting. It's a much more, it's a format that's much more conducive to actually having a discussion with our city's leadership. You mentioned that as fire chief, you're head of the LEA, Local Enforcement Agency. You mentioned BKK. So not only are you the head of the LEA and you have this landfill, you have California's largest toxic hazardous waste landfill. Dubious honor. That also makes you not only our fire chief, but our chief officer in terms of environmental safety and hazmat. A couple of weeks ago, Councilman Tony Wu proposed that the city begin looking at the building of new residential housing directly against that toxic hazardous waste landfill. Are you in favor or opposed to residential housing against the hazardous waste landfill?
Brian, it's always a good conversation with you, and I love them. But and I could have bet money that would have been a question coming from Brian Jobs. To answer your question is to clarify what you stated is I am the LEA that is in charge of the enforcement to the inspections and evaluation of the Class 3 household hazardous waste portion. I have no jurisdiction or authority over the Class 1 hazardous waste, as you well know. What I have the authority of related to the whole property there is how we respond to an emergency there. It is a very large target hazard for our firefighters to respond to, for any emergency that takes place there for our community. And I am in charge of making sure we're properly able to respond to that, to which we are making some strides to understand how to mitigate emergency there. We have done some target hazard evaluation there. We've sent some personnel to hazard materials school, and we're doing that. So I can answer and clarify what you stated there. I have no jurisdiction over Class 1, as you know. To answer your other question, I don't have enough documentation to make that assumption right now. It's just up there the other day for a couple hours, understanding the probes and where the vacuums and stuff is up there. That answer is up to people outside of this room, the different regulating authorities, to when a project comes in. When a project would come in for anything there, no matter who sets it up, the city council, if they approve whatever, there are still regulatory authorities that have to make sure that that community development, if it's a business park, if it's residential structures, will have to be approved, and those agencies would have to do it. And I would have to follow whatever the code states, and I would follow whatever the law states with that. I can't have an opinion to say that I don't like it or I dislike it. I'm going to follow what the laws state and what the authorities say what we can do up there. That would be my answer to that.
My last question, because I have to go back to work actually for our audit. I'm going to ask this question as a finance professional and as an auditor, no other reason, as devil's advocate. You mentioned standards of care, what's lacking in the department outside of personnel. I work for a not-for-profit. I consider a city a government agency, similar to a not-for-profit. We only have so much money coming in. That's all we can spend, right? We get this much. That's how much comes out. We don't get a COLA raise every year because we're a not-for-profit. So how open is the department to foregoing those raises so they have money to fix the equipment? And again, I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, I don't want to discuss, negotiate, stuff like that. That's
exactly,
city management and stuff like that.
Like in general.
But if you go back over a number of years, I think there's been a number of years where there wasn't raises that all the departments in the city and all the departments in different cities forego raises to help with the budget of the city. So that's a whole different animal with there. To let you know, and to also answer a question you asked earlier, what does the fire chief do, is pounding the streets getting grants, working and hitting every dollar that we can do. We've done very hard in the last 3-4 years to be prepared for any grant dollar that comes through, state, federal, local, anything. So they say, hey, we have an extra $19. West Covina is ready to go to buy shovels with that $19. So that's what we've done to help mitigate the problems in our budget. And we've brought a lot of stuff in. We brought in the Lucas devices. So we have that. We have the gurneys to help transport patients. We brought in a number of stuff. Our urban search and rescue training and equipment has been through grants. And we've turned in grants all the time. So with the budgeting, we do try to find other ways to fill that. But to answer your question about the COLA and stuff, that's a whole negotiation thing. And I don't know if Dave has.
Well, Marcia, if I can try and answer that one as well. I think it's really fundamentally a question of good employer relations. It's a human resource question. We've chosen to have a paid professional department. What that implies is that these are people that know their business and deserve a competitive wage and benefits to go. We're competing for that talent in a labor market, and our plan cannot be that everybody forgoes a raise every year because costs go up. You go to the grocery store and try and buy a dozen eggs this week. You know, it's unbelievable. And they're shopping for the same groceries as the rest of us. And so I'm proud of the fact that we have all 9 of our unions, including this one, under contract in a multi-year agreement. And I don't want to go back to the days where we don't have contracts with any of our unions. I want to have multi-year contracts with all of them going forward. But on the fiscal end, it comes at a cost. But our plan can't be the employees will become volunteers by foregoing raises over years. It's not realistic.
We've brought a number of personnel in our department, trained them, bought them equipment. They go on calls, and they leave us to go to other departments that do exactly what the city manager stated. They fund their department, and we've done a great job to do good with that, but we need to do better to help keep people. Retention is an issue that we want to work on.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi. So I think I have an easy question, but you mentioned all of this stuff about all the trucks and engines, and I never know which one's which. And I'll still forget when you told me which one had the ladder on truck on the top. And my son always yells at me. I call them wrong. But I was just wondering when we're going to get a new station.
Well, the city government.
I hear that we're getting one, but has it started or is it in the process of starting?
I'm
I thought it was an easy question, but you guys are all staring at me.
I wasn't sure if he wanted to take it, but I'm happy to. The question is, are we going to get a new station? Fire Station 1 was in, well, to put it kindly, it was in a state of disrepair.
Right.
We did an objective third-party analysis through our Southern California Joint Powers Insurance Authority, and they recommended that it be closed because of all the problems. And so we stood up behind the existing fire station, a temporary building, which at least keeps us in crew quarters that are adequate. That can't be the plan forever. The city is contemplating sale of that whole parcel and a relocation of that station here to the Civic Center campus. But for that to happen, a lot of intermediate steps would have to occur. We're not now in contract with anybody to buy that property, and those land transactions can take multiple years to go through a proper planning process. We did have a little layout, a site plan that showed where Fire Station 1 could fit on this Civic Center campus, but we haven't gone further with plans, and those haven't been publicly prepared or presented. So I'd say it's a possibility, but it's not reality. It's something that's under conversation.
Okay. Like, couldn't they just rebuild it on the same property then?
Could. Yes, could.
JD?
Hi, Chief. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you. And to echo Brian's compliment, a lot of good information, and having sort of worked in that line of business and having a daughter that has as well, I can vouch that 99.9% of the things you said tonight are as described.
99.9.
Yeah, you're doing pretty good. Batting 1,000 over.
Thank you.
My question is with regards to the tier dispatching. many calls that come in for our service here in West Covina come through the 911 system, and they use the dispatch, that sort of tier dispatching. Is that form of dispatching more effective than what we aren't able to afford in our city? I hope you understand that question. And what I'm really trying to say is, if they're able to assess the need, consequently, our department responds adequately but efficiently, then why are we not willing to invest? Because I kind of heard that it's a matter of staffing, the reason why we're not going to the tier dispatching system. Why are we not willing to invest in that? It seems that either immediately or in the long run, we're going to probably benefit.
So to answer your question,
okay,
sorry, go on. To answer your question with that tier dispatching, we do want tier dispatching, but I don't want everybody to sell everything on tier dispatching to a department that's a mid-sized department that runs 10,000 calls a year. Tier dispatching will help very minimal. We don't have the number of resources, the different type of fielded resources like the ambulances that are BLS, to where we can use a robust tier dispatch system. We're still going to send mostly a fire engine and a paramedic unit to almost every single call for service. It would have to be really a narrow amount of calls that the calls for service. Remember, the person calling, A, is in frantic. They don't really know what's going on, and they're not an emergency medical professional to help us with what's going on there. So if somebody fell and they're bleeding, somebody calls they fell and they're bleeding is going to get a fire engine and a paramedic unit. But that just may be somebody who fell and has a little tiny scratch. There's one drop of blood. They probably don't need that. But we're not going to tier that out of just sending EMTs. We would never want that to your house, because that one also could be a blunt head trauma to where the person actually starts seizing or they lose all kinds of other problems. We don't want that. We want to have the most effective resources to respond. So unless we were going to invest further to have more resources fielded each day, which would cost more, be it basic life support ambulances readily available to go on a tiered dispatch type call, the less basic life support calls. And a lot of calls we go on that we go as ALS, we then help and treat the people to make it a basic life support transport, like they cut their leg, they cut their arms or something, emergency like that, or their sugar was low and we give them sugar. Now they really don't need all the paramedics to go on that call. But we've actually needed the paramedics there to now make it no longer advanced life supports. Now it's a basic life support call. So there's kind of confusion on that.
Does the city currently send out just a paramedic truck to respond to medical calls?
No.
Or is it always accompanied with a ladder truck?
Well, no. So our ideal response to every medical call for service for EMS is a fire engine and a paramedic ambulance. The truck only goes if it's a call for service in Station 2, or if Station 2 is covering another station that's maybe already on a call. We send both of those resources, a fire apparatus, that's a fire engine or truck, or a paramedic unit to every single call. Tier dispatch, like I said, wouldn't really decrease the need for those two apparatus in every call in our system. It will help a little bit, and we should have tier dispatching. But the number of calls they would take out of the response is not.
And I understand if a ladder truck manned with paramedics may have to respond to a call and get there first, and consequently be on site for the incident or the accident. But so do you customarily send out a paramedic truck along with the ladder truck? That's your customary practice in West Covina?
So our truck has a paramedic on it. Our fire engines have a paramedic on it in one capacity or another, captain, engineer, and firefighter, and they are a paramedic assessment unit. They're deemed by the LA County to be able to do advanced life support care on that apparatus. So we do send a paramedic to every call on one of those apparatuses with the dual paramedic ambulance.
I guess what my question really is, why is there a need for a ladder truck with paramedics when you already have sent out on a medical call a unit with two paramedics? What is the need for the additional ladder truck to arrive? And like I said, in the event that the paramedic truck's not available, the ladder truck may have to substitute because they too are staffed with paramedics. But if it's done customarily, then it seems like it's overkill.
So our ladder truck is being utilized right now as a fire engine and a fire truck. It's being used as both at Station 2. So it's going to go on every call for EMS.
Okay, my second question, Chief, is you use AMR for medical transportation. AMR is also staffed with paramedics.
We do not use AMR for...
I thought I saw in the presentation AMR
we
was
could use them for a basic life support if they're available, if we don't have transportation, if one of our transportations aren't available.
Okay, so basic life support. Why are they not used for more severe situations in terms of their paramedics so that they can relieve the city paramedics, making them available more readily for other calls, right? Because they do have the same paramedics, licensed paramedics in the AMR trucks.
Yes and no. So that private company is in the business of making a profit, and they have those paramedics to respond to calls for service that are interfacility transports, that are critical patients going from hospital to hospital. That's what their paramedics are for in the private companies. That's where they make their money from. They're not going to make the money and profit from those private companies working for a city and responding to those calls. In LA County, currently right now, there's not any departments that have paramedics from a private ambulance company that run the calls that I'm aware of. And we use AMR, CARE, Guardian, a bunch of different ambulance companies when we don't have one of our units to go. And when they come, they actually get to bill the patient and they keep that money. That's the agreement in the LA County, the way it works. If we're out and we're responsible for transportation, in West Covina, we have our rights to do, and we're responsible for transportation, where sometimes we can't do it. So when we have the ability, sometimes our dispatch center calls and gets those ambulance to come and help with LA County that's in here, or just our fire engines that are on a call, and it's transporting needs. We call these ambulance companies to come, and then they will transport for us. But when it comes to paramedics, they're not readily available. They don't have paramedics. When you see all those ambulances running around town all over the place, those aren't paramedics. Very, very small amount. I'd probably say less than 1 or 2% are paramedics. The paramedics in those private companies are utilized for interfacility transports. They're there to make a profit. We're here to serve the community as best we can in public safety. That's our goal. Our goal is not to, we're to get as much revenue as we can, but we're not here to be a profit company like Marcia stated, a nonprofit. We're similar to that.
Thank you.
But I wanted to say that we do in the field, our firefighters, our captains, our engineers, we do somewhat of a tiered dispatching. When another call comes down and they're currently on a call that resource, both of those resources aren't needed, they'll break away immediately and go to the next call from the call they're on. Or even sometimes responding to a call. If the paramedics get on scene first and they say, hey, Engine 1, we don't need you. You can go available for the next call. Or Engine 1 gets on scene and says, hey, Rescue 1, we don't need you. And we relieve them people from responding to calls. Driving license sirens is dangerous, so we want to mitigate that. We want to lessen that as much as possible. So we do tier bit dispatching. We can do tier bit dispatching, but it is a good thing to have, but it's not going to decrease the 10,000 calls, what everybody is trying to talk about. It's not. Our calls for service aren't not 99% basic life support. We save a lot of people, and we do advanced life support on a regular basis.
Thank you for coming. My name is Terry Kozad. Just thought I'd introduce myself since you know everybody else is here, it seems. I have a couple questions regarding response time. The first one, and maybe the city manager too, if they move the fire station to near the library, will you be doing a study about the response time? Because where it's located now seems much more centrally located to the district that it serves. So you do a response time study before you even attempt.
That would go to the standards of
move
coverage and risk assessment that the city manager talked about and I talked about in the slides. Mm-hmm. We would need that to understand where we are proposing future fire stations. For example, back in 2007, it was proposed that Station 3, which is at Puente and Sunset, should be moved to Lark Allen and Puente to help with the standards of coverage and on our risk.
Right, but that was in the middle of a park. I lived there. So we really didn't want a fire station.
Nobody wants a fire station, and
no,
nobody need a fire station.
No, and it's a park. We don't have very much green space. And the other is, actually, I was the person who called for that. You showed a picture of the recent fire on Toland Avenue.
Oh, yes.
And I called, and it took me 3 times calling to get through to 911. So I was wondering if that's a typical response when you call 911.
No,
Did you call 3 separate times?
That is definitely not the typical. We want to answer as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And I can talk to you later and get some more information about that. We can look into that at a later date, but I have no idea what took place in that.
Yeah, and I can vouch for your response times because it took 10 minutes for a fire truck to get to that spot from the time that I called. Because I timed it on my phone, it told me the time I made that call. And then I looked at my clock or my phone when the fire truck arrived, and it was 10 minutes later.
Well,
And
first,
it's
I'd
right
like to
down the
thank you for
street.
calling 911. I'd like to thank you for calling 911 to get us there.
Yeah.
I will say that when that call came down, I actually responded myself too as the fire chief.
Right,
I
I
was
saw
there
you
in
there.
probably 3.5 minutes from the time it got dispatched from our dispatch center. And the fire engine was about 2 seconds before me.
Really?
So we'd have
Because
to
it
look
was
in to
10
see what
minutes
happened
from
there.
the time I called. So maybe it took a long time for the dispatcher to get to you. Because it took 10 minutes from the time that I called.
When you leave, can I get your information so we can look into that and see what happened?
Sure.
That's very important to find out if there was some breakdown.
Yeah, because when I called, it was smoke. And when you got there, it was in flames.
I would love to find out where that call went to. Sometimes if you call on your cell phone, it may go to CHP, which has to route it to different locations. If you call from your landline, it most likely went.
It was a cell phone right in front of there, so maybe that had something to do with it.
It all depends on which tower could have taken. I'd love to talk to you about that and get that information. It's very important information to find out how we can do better on that. But I will tell you from the time.
I'm not faulting you at all.
No, I understand.
I was just curious.
Our dispatch center on a regular basis works very hard to get the calls out, and they do it roughly in sometimes 5 to 10 seconds. We've increased, as council has given us money to enhance our station alerting system, which is amazing. As they're inputting the call for service, it's already in the background deciding who's available, who can go to that call, and once they commit that it's a real call in West Covina and what resources go, the stations are alerted electronically, and they get up and they start going to that call. So there's something happened in that call, and I'd love to work with you on that.
Sure.
But I myself saw the smoke and responded when dispatched it out, and I was there roughly, and I was coming from Barranca and Workman. So roughly like 4 minutes, 3 minutes to get there.
Okay.
If there aren't any other questions, some people aren't comfortable asking in a group setting. I'd like to offer that the chief and I will stay as long as anybody wants to talk. We've got a lot of members of the city family here tonight, of all three of our assistant chiefs, Chief Brown, Chief Rudolph, Chief Fountain. Our city treasurer is here, Councilmember Cantos, both assistant city managers, our city treasurer. So the city family is very well represented here tonight, and we'll stick around as long as anybody wants to talk to us. If there aren't any more group questions, if there are, we're happy to take them now.
I'm not sure if this is a group question, but it's my question.
Sure. I meant questions for the group, JD.
Oh, okay. Chief, and I'm not trying to trip you up or anything, but I recall while at the podium, you made the statement to Councilman Wu as a result of him kind of pushing the idea, well, if we staff you properly, are we going to be able to mitigate the overtime issue? And you answered to the affirmative.
Yes.
But tonight you depicted this idea that this problem of overtime is systemic and there's really no solution to it because everybody has the right to overtime, FMLA, what have you. And it's just part of the process. So I'm not sure how to square your statement that night to what you said tonight. Tonight I kind of walk away. What I'm taking away is there's no solution here. This is just, they need to budget all this additional money so that you don't come up with a deficit at the end.
There is a solution.
But
it's a very good question.
Let me just, one last thing. The problem is that the overtime and the overage seems to fluctuate. So, because it isn't fixed. So even if they gave you more money, the following year you may come under, but the year after that you'll be over again, and they can't. The city nor anyone can continue to just issue out money on this revolving overtime plan, right? And especially if there's no solution. Did I misunderstand?
No, it's a very good question. And the answer to your question is yes. I stated if we fill the vacancies, the amount of overtime spent will go down. I never, and I made sure I said that up there, that overtime will never go away. To keep resources responding to calls every day for constant staffing, there will be a need for a budgeted of overtime. Now, what is dynamic to the budgeted overtime, as I stated in the slides, is the other things that are unforeseen, vacancies, people leaving, IODs, retirements, things like that, those are unknown. And that's where we can't control. But as long as we keep the vacancies to a minimum, which that was the problem back in the day, was the vacancies were excessive. I think 12 to 14 persons off, positions open, and we had to fill those to keep a fully staffed and all-risk fire department. Now, I will make a note. If you don't want overtime, if the councils want overtime, we don't backfill, you will not have a resource to go to a call. If we don't put somebody in that vehicle, in that apparatus to respond to a 911 call, and we won't pay overtime if we don't do that, you're not going to have somebody come to your house when you're sick, when a tree falls down, when there's a fire. So that would, if we paid zero overtime and we didn't fill the spots, which we could do that, but you will be coming in here saying, that's not acceptable. We want somebody to come to my house when I call 911. Brownout. If we browned out, and we did a study, we did live exactly what took place for a 2-week period of actual leaves back months ago, and we saw what it would be, and we shared that at a council town meeting, I don't know how long it was, a year ago, Dave, where we'd have some of those days we'd have one apparatus respond to a call if we browned out. We would have, we can go on and on and on. It's endless to tell you how it would be if we did brown out. If we don't want to have a resource available to a call for service to mitigate emergency, to save a life, then we won't have to pay any overtime. When somebody takes off, we don't backfill. That's not acceptable. You don't want that in your city. I don't want that here as the fire chief.
Okay. Just going to go more into the inspection side of things. So I'm just thinking motorcycle helmets. We have DOT and then we have Snell approved, which is a little better than the DOT. All these new housing developments, condensed, dense housing developments, from an inspection point, do you see those being DOT or Snell?
Well, there's only one standard.
Are they meeting a basic standard, or is there like a better standard that can be achieved?
There's the building code and the fire code that everybody adopts that we adopt and we do, and we enhance some of those codes to make them more relevant to West Covina. Those codes are followed for any construction, no matter what it is, business, residential, an accessory dwelling unit. They follow those standards. That's what we do. There's only one standard. There's no DOT or Snell. What there is let's say, I can give you an example where there's the California Fire Code that for whatever it may be, the city of West Covina may determine as the fire marshal might go, you know what, we want nothing stacked below a sprinkler, 20 inches below the sprinkler, but the national standard or the standard is 16 inches. We actually can increase ours. We can make it more stringent, but there's only one standard for all building codes and fire codes that everybody follows.
Okay. And then follow-up question on that is, seeing for I have an understanding that through some California housing initiative, there's a goal to see like 5,000 additional units in West Covina by 2028, which I feel is going to bring a lot more dense housing projects. Are you looking at engines or ladders per se, since we're looking to go up with the structures in West Covina?
If you notice in the slide, I talked about the strategic plan, which encompasses that. The reason our call volume continues to go up is we are building more. We have more businesses. We are bringing in more. There's more people coming here. The calls for service are going to go up, and we do need to have a plan for 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 years. What is our population going to look like? What is our housing is going to look like? Are they going to be high rises? Do we have the proper equipment to service those communities? We have one fire truck that's being utilized as a fire engine. If that is on a cardiac arrest and they're actually doing CPR and saving a life, and we have a fire in one of our high rises, we don't have a truck to respond to that call. So that's a strategic plan issue.
A slightly different subject, since the audience is leaving. With the new refrigerants coming in, they're flammable. Your take on the impact in especially multi residential dwellings where they may have VRF and larger systems. Do you think you'll see an issue?
as long as they follow the codes and we follow the standards to field our personnel and train properly to respond to those emergencies, I don't see an issue. We will mitigate every emergency. We will evaluate what's going on there, the conditions, and we will mitigate it just with the resources that we need.
Are going to be providing water-based systems now instead of R32, which is a flammable refrigerant.
I will say right off the bat that I'm biased. Served by the fire department, just like the rest of us are. My wood shop caught fire one day, and the fire department got there before we even noticed. They were incredibly professional, amazingly well-trained, remained calm, could not have asked for any bit better of performance. They saved my house. They saved my neighbor's house. I don't know what else would have happened. I lived down the street from a fire station. I told them, you blow that siren as much as you want when you go by my house. I will want to live next to a fire department. And I think the West Covina Fire Department is about the best there is.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. And there's a number of firefighters that are here that came out to support as well, and we appreciate them. And thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. Well, if there's nothing else, anybody wants to talk to us privately, like I said, like Dave said, we're going to be here. We can talk to us if you'd like. Thank you guys for coming up. I hope it was very informative, and I appreciate your time and your day. Thank you.